Hey everyone, and welcome right back to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and honestly deeply critical sociological analysis of Edward Billy Meier's FIGU movement. Now, at first glance, this looks like your standard mid-century flying saucer narrative, right? It's full of cosmic wisdom, space-age peace signs, the whole shebang. But as researchers have meticulously documented in the source material, if you scratch just a tiny bit below that surface, the narrative shifts into something much darker and far more terrestrial. We're going to explore how fringe cosmic lore can actually serve as a vessel for some pretty dangerous earthly ideologies.
And that brings us to the central paradox of our explainer today. You really have to ask yourself, how exactly does a supposedly peaceful UFO cult become a pipeline for white supremacy? Sociologists actually call this a Trojan horse. It's this idea of using the pure awe of extraterrestrial contact to slowly normalize incredibly dangerous exclusionary ideologies without people even realizing it's happening.
So to understand how this works, we first need to look at the facade. Back in the 1970s, a Swiss man named Billy Meier made a really foundational claim. He said he was the sole earthly emissary for a highly advanced alien race. Initially, he called them Pleiadians, but later he kind of shifted the story to say they were the Pleisuran, coming from a dimension 80 light-years beyond the Pleiades. And he built this massive New Age aesthetic around these entities, describing them as the quintessential Nordic aliens. You know the trope: beautiful, spiritually advanced, and here to guide humanity. It all sounds very cosmic and enlightened, right? Well, maybe a little too perfect.
Because then, the scientific community actually took a look at his evidence. Meier's high-resolution photos of alien beam ships were conclusively debunked as literally common garbage can lids and Christmas ornaments. And it gets even more bizarre, because his beautiful female aliens were exposed as dancers from the Dean Martin show. No way, right? But to keep his followers insulated, Meier constructed these wildly elaborate excuses. He claimed the aliens telepathically beamed ship designs into the minds of earthly garbage can manufacturers, and that the infamous Men in Black maliciously swapped his real alien photos with TV dancers while he had amnesia. You can't make this stuff up.
It's really easy to laugh at garbage can lids and TV dancers. But the sociological research points to something deeply disturbing hiding right beneath this absurd surface. Section 1, Hitler Apologia. Cosmic defenses for evil.
Let's look at the cosmology Meier actually built. According to his texts, these Nordic aliens aren't just advanced, they represent a rigid, cosmos-wide racial hierarchy. The source material details a universe driven by genetic purity, explicitly warning against the quote-unquote catastrophic consequences of racial intermingling. Furthermore, Meier claims that the most evolved white-skinned aliens all speak German, presenting it as the supreme universal language. So the absolute crucial point here is that this isn't just quirky science fiction. Researchers point out that this is an exact mirror of terrestrial white supremacy, just repackaged as advanced alien biology.
And this repackaging reaches its most alarming peak when addressing real-world history. Meier's own Contact Report 36 literally describes Adolf Hitler as a genius who was destined to lead and create a peaceful, united world. Sociological analysis highlights this as a shocking piece of Hitler apologia woven directly into the cult's foundational scripture.
To justify this within a supposedly peaceful cosmology, the cult claims Hitler was actually meant to do good, but, and here's the catch, he was supposedly hijacked and possessed by evil extraterrestrials known as the Giza intelligences. The terrestrial reality of this claim is much darker, though. This narrative completely bypasses the real-world fascist violence and racism that caused genocide, and it basically recodes it simply as an alien glitch.
This rewriting of morality dictates their views on the future of humanity, too. Section 2, Eco-Fascism, Eugenics as Ecology.
To really understand the cult stance here, we need to look at eco-fascism. That's the utilization of authoritarian environmentalism to justify suppressing marginalized populations. Cults like FIGU weaponize very real ecological fears. They borrow heavily from debunked, recycled terrestrial panic, stuff like Paul Ehrlich's 1968 book, The Population Bomb, and they hide it under a veneer of cosmic necessity.
According to Meier and his alleged Pleisuran contacts, the single greatest threat to the universe is human overpopulation, and their solution? A radical, worldwide, birth stop directive. Listen, this is not about voluntary family planning. In a fabricated religious text Meier authored, called the Talmud of Jemanuel, he outlines horrific, violent punishments for violating these reproductive quotas. The text explicitly mandates forced sterilization, castration,
banishment, and even execution for those deemed unfit or who violate these so-called laws of nature.
Now, if those mandates sound familiar to you, they absolutely should, because this alien wisdom is really just recycled 20th century terrestrial eugenics. Think about it. In 1883, Francis Galton coined the term. By 1907, Indiana passed the world's first forcible sterilization law, followed by Virginia in 1924, which specifically targeted those deemed a menace to the quote-unquote genetic welfare of society. Meier is essentially laundering the most abhorrent practices of human history through the sterile, detached language of extraterrestrial science.
And we have to ask, who historically suffers under these laws? Well, let's put that into perspective. 7,600. That is the number of people forcibly sterilized in just the state of North Carolina alone. State-sponsored eugenics has always aggressively targeted vulnerable groups. In North Carolina, African-American women were disproportionately targeted, and similar aggressive sterilization campaigns were famously deployed in Puerto Rico. When a cult demands reproductive control, earthly history tells us exactly who becomes the target.
Which brings us to a glaring hypocrisy in this entire ecological narrative. Section 3, Capitalist Blind Spot, Ignoring the Real Cause.
When we look at these arguments about overpopulation, a really stark hypocrisy emerges. The cult demands these draconian population reductions, which implicitly target families in the global south, but they completely ignore the actual ecological reality. The primary driver of environmental degradation isn't population size in developing nations, it's Western capitalist resource extraction and hyperconsumption. This framing shifts the blame entirely. It allows Western followers to feel, spiritually superior without ever having to critique or change their own consumption habits.
Sociologists in our source material describe this ideology perfectly. They call it a slippery eugenics, systematically shifting the blame for global environmental crises onto the reproductive habits of underprivileged and indigenous populations. Again, it's a mechanism that just lets Westerners off the hook while maintaining a sense of cosmic salvation.
Which leaves us with a vital question to ponder today. If real-world evil, like fascism, white supremacy, and eugenics, can be simply dismissed as an alien disruption or a cosmic necessity, what human injustices are we being trained to ignore right here, right now? It's a powerful reminder that when we study fringe movements, we absolutely must look past the stars to see what ideologies they're actually planting in the soil. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the narratives around you.